Who's up next here, Chase?
Let's go with Adrian Dittman. Adrian, go ahead and unmute yourself and say what you have to say.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that David Icke, complains of, I don't know, being connected to the hive mind, even though he already is. I mean, you're right now speaking to thousands of people simultaneously, which is a selective hive mind via a piece of tech. It's just not integrated into your brain. That's the only difference. As for Wi-Fi fields, do you think that the internet is a simulated reality pulled over our eyes, or just an interface? Because it's
he's saying we're already in a false reality. Sorry, I'll shut up. He's saying we're already in a false reality, and they're creating a system within a system, right, David?
That's absolutely right. But there's a big difference from what the gentleman's just said, that we're in a hive mind and all that stuff as we're speaking. But, there's a difference between having connections with people and communications with people, and having the perceptions that we make of what we say and what we make of what other people say.
The system, it's going to show us the input it wants, is the issue.
Yeah, being given to us by a hive mind. It was kind of funny how sci-fi kind of later mirrors reality. This is probably not a coincidence either. And in Star Trek, they had the Borg, and the Borg were kind of a kind of part technological kind of race. And what they did was infuse people with like nano probes to make them part of the Borg hive mind, the collective, as they called it. And those nano probes we now call smart dust, nanobots, nanotechnology, all these things. And this is all building this hive mind that I'm talking about. And like I say, communication is fine and interaction is fine. We should have it. Of course we should. That's why I'm glad the Putin interview happened. But there's a big difference between that and having our perceptions controlled in and
David, let me say this. Notice how the globalists want to kill individual free communication in the internet. They want it to all be through this filter, which is another form of the virtual reality paradigm you're talking about. But I forget the name of the person commenting. But, sir, do you want to have a comeback to David Icke? Go ahead. Is he gone? Okay.
I'm still here.
You have a quick comeback to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, you're already connected to all of this. You think that everything is different, or that we don't have a smart dust, so to speak. You don't need smart dust when you have a device that is capable of all the things that you've mentioned, and you are already connected to the hive mind. What the hell are you communicating on right now? Who are you communicating with? All the people. Their perceptions shared through a medium of speech. Like, there is structurally no difference between having a bunch of nanobots running through your bloodstream accomplishing the same thing when you're holding a device that is connected to this thing that is a field of information that is the internet. There's nothing wrong about it. There's nothing strange about it. It's just the way things are. Integrating stuff like this into ourselves biologically just removes the latency and decreases the latency for information transmission.
By the way, I think this is Elon Musk.
There's literally no difference.
Is this Elon Musk?
It's really not. No, it's really not. I'm just weird. Don't worry about it.
Well, you could be a dead ringer for him. Well, the Elon clone, what else do you want to say?
100%.
Elon clone, go ahead.
Yeah, there are theories. There are theories. Yeah, there are theories. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
It's kind of stupid. Don't worry about it.
Well, what else would you like to say, sir?
I just think this. I just think it is ironic. I mean, you want to talk about the simulation? Everybody started speaking of the topic of simulation, how we're in this false reality ever since the Matrix movie dropped. A lot of people are afraid of it, but they don't even understand the context of why the movie even happened and why everyone's so afraid of it. When in reality, everybody got afraid of being integrated with machines and how machines were advancing faster than the things that created them. Thereby, the fear caused the disaster, which then caused the simulation within the Matrix. It's crazy, right? And even then, everybody bases their ideology of a simulation based off of a movie that they themselves haven't even fully understood. Because if you did, you'd realize that there is no real world at all. I mean, what do you think this is? And even if it is a simulation, what are you going to do? You're going to break it? What's the point? I mean, you can play it and you can build really cool shit. And you can craft it and make it better. I think that's what you have to do. If you're going to break it, that's just an equivalent of killing yourself. And if you're going to break it for everyone else, then that's called mass murder. That's called genocide. So don't break the simulation. I don't understand the resistance for understanding the world in which we're in, to the extent that we say we could shape it to make it better, but we're just trying to understand it to break it.
Well, whoever this is, please don't hang up. We're on radio station. We have to go to break in a moment. But David Icke, you're talking to somebody that AI print is Elon Musk, or is his twin, his doppelganger. What do you want to say to this caller?
Well, is it better that we know about the reality that we're in and how we're creating it and what it's designed to do, or not to know and be in complete ignorance of the very reality we are experiencing? What people do with the knowledge of understanding the reality that they are in is up to them completely. But we should surely be pursuing an understanding of what is this place, what are we doing here? Otherwise, we just go through life being pawns of a game we don't
David, we got to go to break, and I want to ask the ex-poster that sounds just like Elon Musk, a dead ringer. Please stay there if you can. We're on radio station, so we have to at least break twice an hour. We got to go to a 3-minute break. We're going to come right back. I hope the caller stays there. It sounds just like Elon Musk. But I get the point of the Elon Musk sounding person. He's saying if we don't use tools, like the Native Americans didn't have guns, so they lost. He's saying, why not use it? It's kind of what I'm getting. But we'll come right back and have the person that sounds just like Elon Musk, a little bit of an angry Elon Musk, finish up what he wants to say, and they'll get David Icke here. I am in the twilight zone right now. Got David Icke and a guy that sounds just like Elon Musk. And I've been on it with 2.5 hours with Elon Musk before. We're going to figure this out. This is News Megan. Stay with us. All right, to all the folks on X, I'm still on terrestrial radio. We got to take a few ads an hour for our local affiliates. Remember back when the radio and TV didn't watch you, you listened and watched it? We're still on that. That's how when they took me off the internet 5 years ago, we stayed on air, was because we're on the old system, but it's being phased out. All right, we have Adrian Dittman, who is a dead ringer for Elon Musk. And I just want to give Adrian Dittman the floor. Got cut off by the break in the David Icke encounter. Adrian, I hope you're still there. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm still here. Where were we at?
You were getting cut off. You were explaining why not engage it. You were explaining your view on AI and computers and the systems versus what I guess people could call kind of a troglodyte view.
Yeah, we like to view as the system. Okay, humans have this existential paradox built into them. We initially want to surpass anything that surpasses us, or eliminate it if we can't. This is why we're afraid of anything that's different, say, for instance, technology. I think, for instance, when we look at AI, we look at what it's capable of, and we look at the fact that we are capable of, say, generating a simulated reality in which we can do almost anything, we start to ask these questions and say, oh my God, let's look within real quick and then see how that is being projected out into the world, and how much of what we think is not real is real. So it's like if you think of ourselves and how we navigate through the world, we are like a machine that continually projects out into the world a web of assumptions that then gets adjusted by whatever structure someone else perceives or we perceive. And then we internalize that, and then we think it's reality. So by default, whatever version of reality that we think is real is exceedingly limited to our senses. So I agree in the sense that, we don't see much of our reality. Say with David Icke, what he's saying, we should see the Wi-Fi field. I think all of this is possible. We could actually see, or say perceive rather, more of the reality that is around us if we were to augment ourselves, as opposed to discarding the augmentation. If AI, for instance, gets connected to us, I don't think it's going to be the end of us. It's just going to help us evolve faster and better. You see, you can't beat this thing. It's better than us. It is much better than us. It is not just better than us. It is all of us put together in one thing, simplified, without the biological constraints that every other human brain has. It is actually quite a beautiful technology, but it is also risky. And I think the risk factor is something that should be spoken of, but in a realistic sense, to the point that we don't stop its development.
Please don't go, Adrian. Let's get David Icke's response. David Icke, stay there. David.
Yeah, I mean, can we just get this right? Is this Elon Musk or not? Never mind the name. Is it Elon Musk or what?
Absolutely not. Nope. Absolutely not.
No.
I am definitely not Elon. 100% not.
Someone told me in the break, oh, this is definitely Elon Musk. So that's all right.
No, look, it needs plausible deniability. This is okay. Let's just say it's Elon Musk. You got any questions for him?
Okay. What I was saying is, look, people need to understand what is happening and what they're part of, and then maybe they can make some choices about what how they respond to it. But if you're living in a reality which is not the reality you think you're experiencing, and some other force is manipulating that reality to manipulate your perception, to manipulate you, then that needs exposing. And it's all right talking about AI this, AI that, but AI is designed to take over the human mind and therefore replace it. People like Ray Kurzweil at Google, a so-called futurist, has openly talked about this years ago, that by 2030 this will be happening, and that eventually, once the connection is made, that AI will do more and more of human thinking until human thinking as we know it is basically negligible. And that's the end of humans as we have.
And I think what Adrian said, because I want a piece of this, he said, we don't want to have VR goggles that give us the false reality by some company, but what about augmentation, theoretically, that lets us actually see beyond the limitations we're in?
Well, if you have a chip in your brain and it's feeding you a sense of reality, then it's whatever's feeding you that sense of reality is giving you your sense of reality.
Well, let's say it accesses a part of the brain for infrared. It's not telling you what to see. It just allows you to see infrared, which your brain can now do.
No. I'm talking about where it's meant to go. It's meant to go to the end result where, and Kurzweil said this, and others have said it too, that it's meant to go to the point where you get your perceptions delivered. And what are your perceptions? They are your sense of reality. And this is a very dark and dangerous road. And I don't care if it's a hard sell or it's a soft sell. It's a dangerous road. It's not a world I want to live in.
Well, I think Elon Musk has said, beware those that worship AI gods. But Adrian, you seem to have some opinions on this. I mean, you don't know Elon Musk, obviously, but from researching him, what do you think his views are, what he wants?
It's clear that he wants to augment us with AI and various other tech to basically enhance our experience of the world and to also make us more capable of maneuvering through the world. Right? That seems to be his thing. But if I go to David Icke's point, I think it's not that you're afraid of, say, you're not concerned of the fact that our perceptions themselves are going to be delivered by a piece of tech, but that they are delivered to you in an altered format that somehow benefits whatever centralized entity created that tech. Is that correct?
I'm talking about having our perceptions delivered by an external force with the intention.
Exactly, but how is that a problem if the perceptions that you're being delivered are more than what you already get? I mean, you have a bunch of sensors that are available to you right now, like, say, for instance, your eyes, you have your limbs that sense differences in temperature, you have sensors in your
and those are already being manipulated. Those are already being manipulated, right, Adrian?
Yeah, but how's that a bad thing? Yeah, but how's that a bad thing? This is on its own, it seems very benign. I don't understand where the negative element is. I can only assume that where the negative element is that somehow what is being given to you is false or steers you in a particular direction that benefits the centralized entity that is manipulating your perceptions and the data that's delivered to you. That is then therefore your perception, right?
I think it does come down to where the feed comes from. David, you see what he's saying?
Exactly that. And well, augmented reality, you can stick that in a dark place anyway, from my point of view. But I'm 72. That's my coming up. That's my perception. But if I'm being delivered a sense of perception that gets me to stand up and walk out this room now, when I wouldn't do that if I was sitting here. That is not augmented reality. That is a takeover of reality. And if you are a force that wants to control people, and what are we talking about, Alex? What are we talking about in terms of this global cult and what I say is non-human entities working through it, and the World Economic Forum and all these people? They're seeking to dictate our sense of reality. This is what.
No, I understand. So listen, I'm going to have you another question to Adrian, another question to David Icke, but let me throw that out at you. Tucker Carlson says he believes interdimensional entities are manipulating reality already through this simulation. We all basically know this is. I think we're all agreeing that's pretty much what we're in. We haven't figured it out yet. I think Adrian's saying we can use our own systems of AI to break through that and find out what's happening. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, but regardless, having a debate about this, an open discussion, I think is really healthy. But Adrian, what do you think about the idea that aliens aren't coming from a distant star system, but have actually always been here, like I've said, Tucker Carlson said, and that there is a manipulation already of the reality?
I mean, I haven't seen any actual definitive evidence of aliens. The only proof that we have is, say, really shoddy footage and potentially even altered stuff that then later, of course, has been exposed to be as such. But I mean, it's an interesting theory for sure, and one that does bear a considerable amount of logic. But still, I mean, I haven't seen any really convincing evidence for aliens. I mean, you could say, oh, well, you have some infrastructure that's really difficult for humans to build, so potentially a force was here at some other point, or potentially we have destroyed ourselves. And then, of course, then there's the case for Mars and the fact that if you look at the atmosphere of Mars and you look at the levels of xenon gas within that atmosphere, it is consistent with an environment, a post-nuclear bombardment environment. So it's like there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. We really need to go there and check out what exactly happened there. But regardless of that, I mean, sure, maybe, but I haven't seen any definitive evidence for aliens.
All right, well, that's a perfect Elon Musk answer. So it's either an amazing advanced AI of Elon Musk or it's Elon Musk, Adrian Dittman.
I like to go by Rogue AGI.
Rogue AGI, okay. David Icke, if you had a chance, and maybe Elon will listen to this later, and wanted to ask Elon a few questions instead of, I get you're on your points, but if you were talking to Elon Musk, what would you say to him?
Well, if that was Elon Musk, this is ridiculous. This is the playground, for goodness sake. What I was going to say is that what he's talking about is really low-level stuff. He's talking about going to Mars. Mars is just, in our reality, it's just another part of the bloody simulation. And I'm not saying that aliens are coming from other planets.
So Columbus coming to America was just a simulation?
Everything that happens in our reality is people consciousness operating within a simulation, not realizes it is a simulation, unless they are in the inner core of the cult, and then they bloody will. And I'm saying these non-human entities are coming are based in another dimension, what's called the astral dimension, which is very close to this one and interpenetrates it, but is not of a wavelength that our eyes can see. That's why we don't see them. The point I was making is that does anyone think, I mean, let's just get down to the basis of this. You've spent years, I've spent years, decades and all that, exposing this global cult and its desire to create a dystopia, a global dystopia based on AI control. And we've got people like Klaus Schwab, who are openly for years now saying that, yes, that's what has to happen. We have to augment ourselves and have AI, and then it will tell us what to do and we'll know better and we'll be gods and stuff, according to people like Kurzweil. Now, does anyone think Elon Musk, or whatever he bloody calls himself in his that name, does he believe that those that are creating this AI system of control, which on one level operates as digital currencies and 15
No, I get where you're going. So let's go back to Adrian, who can't speak for Elon Musk, can speak for Adrian. What about, I've noticed the globalists say they want to ban any other independent AIs. They're worried about it. They want their own AI. What is your response to that?
The running logic would be that everyone else's AIs are developed in such a manner that they pose a potential risk. Keep in mind, these are the same types of people who read a few AI research papers and think that they are now AI researchers, even though they just repeat what they have received in verbatim, which ironically makes them more of an AI than the AIs that they're building, because that's essentially just training data, and you're spitting it back out again with no actual innovation assigned to it, because you're not creatively connecting other points of data in a way that they haven't been connected before. So, I mean, okay, yeah, sure, I get the logic behind that. I mean, I've read a lot about AI safety. I'm not an expert by any means, not even close, but I would say this is the logic that I see personally. This is more like a perception and an opinion than an actual definitive take in terms of a fact that I believe is true. I just think there's fear. It's just that, fear. If there's malicious intent behind that, that still remains to be seen. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But if you look at the prime motivator for all of this, it is fear. What is the first thing that any safetyist tells you about? It's the paperclip scenario. Are we familiar with the paperclip scenario?
I am, but tell people.
Yeah, it's very simple. That you give an agent a set goal that says, hey, it's a benign agent. It's an agent that does not seek to destroy anything, but its goal is to turn things into paper clips, to manufacture paper clips. And so eventually it realizes, oh, I could create a whole bunch of more paper clips if I say, arrange the atoms that are inside of your body in such a way that it becomes then a paperclip, and that it begins paperclipping the fucking universe at some point when it reaches critical mass, right? This is obviously bad, because then it kills all of humanity in the pursuit of creating paperclips. It's not trying to do this because it hates humanity. It's just doing this because it's misaligned. It doesn't understand we needed paper clips, but we also want to exist ourselves, right? And so we throw this around and say, oh, so here's the thing. We've developed this exceedingly complicated system, what most people like to refer to as a black box AI. We cannot look at it. We don't understand what it is, even if we tried, because it's too complex to actually perceive. And now we have these things running around, and we have these centralized entities that are very experienced in building technologies that are running the world currently, saying, hey, we can develop this faster, but we have to do it slower. And then we have people who rebel against it saying, hey, I got the GPUs. I got 200 GPUs in the back of my truck right now, and I'm going to make an AI faster than you can. And they do, because they take more risks along the way, right? This is another little aspect to AI safety where you are putting restrictions on yourself. They say, oh shit, we have to be safe about this. And if we're not safe about this, then
so you're saying the AI Wild West
advantage.
You're saying the AI Wild West or the AI wars are here, Adrian? I
mean, yeah, obviously you can run an AI on a small little Apple Watch right now if you wanted to. Just gut it. The computer's there. You have a Mac Mini, you can run an AI on that. The computer's already here. The training is a little bit of a problem. You need more compute for that, but you can definitely run it, and someone else can build it.
Adrian, we're really glad you called in. Please don't hang up. I'm going to give David Icke a closing comment, because the show only has 8 minutes left. I'm going to give Adrian a closing comment, and then we're going to go to the fourth hour with the guest host that's here. And it's my 50th birthday. Somebody's demanding to give me a birthday cake. I love them, but it's whatever. We'll see if that happens. But the point is that David Icke, Adrian's still there. This has been quite the interview. It's going to get a lot of attention. And just closing comments, David Icke.
What am I exposing? What have I been exposing all these years? It's an agenda to ultimately replace the human mind with artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. I've been writing about it for decades. And step by step by step, we move closer and closer to that all the time. That is not an accident. It's the World Economic Forum agenda, it's the Gates agenda, it's the global cult agenda to do that. And we can talk about, oh, well, we could have regulation here or regulation there, and or augmented reality there. But the bottom line is that what's unfolding is the takeover of human perception. How has it been done so far? It's been done by controlling information. So you can censor what you don't want people to hear, because that will affect their perception in a way that you don't want that to happen. So control of information, people get their perceptions from information received. It might be a personal experience. It might be an item on the news. It might be something they see on Facebook. But they're controlling their or their perceptions are controlled by the information they receive and how they process them. What I'm saying is that this is meant to go to a whole new stage in which no longer is it necessary to manipulate information to manipulate perception, because your perceptions will come direct. And, you know, this is where it's going.
David, we understand. Amazing hour and 45 minutes with you. When your book comes out in a few months, I look forward to speaking to you. DavidIcke.com, Iconic.com. Thank you so much, David Icke. All
right, mate. Thank you very much. Been great.
That was powerful.
All the best, Elon.
All right.
See ya.
Or Adrian. It's not Elon. It's just somebody that sounds just like him, and it sounds just as smart as him. So I'm going to shut up for Adrian here in the 6 minutes we have left, and just about the whole world, the Putin interview, war, the economy. We just want to hear what Adrian has to say. Go ahead, Adrian.
Can you give me a second?
Yes, Adrian. You've got the floor to talk about just in general your view on the world.
Just like literally give me a second. Something's about to explode.
All right, something's about to explode. There's David Icke right there.
No mention of God or base reality. No mention of base reality or God. The reality we live in is real. You can build all the simulations you want, but you have to have a reality in the beginning. And then now we're going to discount God completely out of the conversation. And now we're just going to talk to and pretend that Elon Musk is not Elon Musk. And we're going to pretend that he doesn't want to put a chip in, and that Elon Musk is not playing just the tip with the chip. And once he gets that chip in and seen as Adrian's war elsewhere, then he starts fucking. Okay? Nobody's ever considered whether or not our minds are going to be taken over or our bodies. Maybe we're just the flesh bots for the chip because we're cheaper. We'll live off a bowl of rice. And we fix ourselves.
No, Matt, I hear you. But we're having a great talk with Elon Musk. I'm going to come back to you. We got all these great people to talk to, or not Elon Musk, this Adrian fella. Adrian, is whatever blew up fixed now? Can you talk to us?
Always. Yeah. We're like heavily diverting towards Star Trek-esque scenarios. I think if you really want to talk about, say, controlling people's perception and information warfare, probably we are more afraid of this thing than we actually should be. Now, I mean, I want you to consider this for a second. Are you guys aware of, say, a technology known as cortical labs? Do you know what that is? Does anybody know what that is?
I've read of it. Tell us.
Very nice little thing. Basically, the idea is you take a bunch of silicone and you boost what it is capable of by merging it with human biology, by taking neurons and placing them on the chip. Right? This allows you to do some really cool stuff. Right? I mean, you need neurons you need neurons for various tasks, and so that would be one of them. It would be absolutely perfect. So I want you to consider something in the future. Imagine we become a spacefaring race in which eventually we pursue to leave the solar system because the sun will die in a couple billion years. And potentially even the less than that, our planet will be cooked before the inevitability of the sun's collapse and or explosion, rather. We know it is, right? So the problem is you have to leave the solar system, but how the hell are you going to do that if you look at humans right now, them as a biological thing, we're very inefficient. We require a lot of resources. I mean, just look at what it would take to go to Mars. You know, you have to shield us from everything that's out there. You have to look at how many supplies we have. You have to somehow figure out how to pass the time or put us in suspended animation, something we've also not figured out how to do because it's probably impossible. Remember that there was a project in the past where we were exploring trying to freeze people. That didn't work out because, well, it ruptures your cells and it kills you. So we tried it and didn't really work. So if you can't solve that, then the obvious next step would be to take what is human and implant that into a machine. At first, we're going to have, say, a machine implanted into us, but I think at one point, our brain will be implanted into a machine once we reach, say, a certain age as an individual being, right? We'll be discarding a lot of biology, and we will probably even become less of ourselves as a result, because you're not just one life form. You're a cooperative instance of biology made out of bacteria and various other cells that are independently alive. You just cooperate. Much like a machine is made up of many different parts, so are you, and these individual parts are themselves in fact alive. So that would be that is the thing that I personally find worrisome, is that we discard so much of ourselves in the pursuit of, I don't know, escaping, say, our own impending doom via the sun that gave us life at first. So yeah.
So you're saying we can make copies of ourselves? You're saying we can make copies of ourselves and send it all over the universe?
Not necessarily that. What I'm saying is that we can augment ourselves with machinery, or augment ourselves into machinery to such an extent that we can prolong our biological existence as long as possible, up until the point where eventually we'd have to consider making copies of ourselves. But that is so far in the future. There's no telling.
So you're talking about life extension.
Biology, not yet.
Life extension technology.
I'm talking about replacing life as you know it and completely digitizing it. That's the current trend line. If you look at it, you can harvest data from anyone and reconstruct them in a digital sense. Now, whether or not that is the way forward is still up to debate. I think we have a lot of time and a lot of innovation until we reach this point. And we don't know enough we don't know enough of the brain. We don't know enough of the body. We don't know enough about the universe. We don't know where all the information in our head is actually being stored, or where it is coming from, how we operate, and why we have vivid hallucinations when we take certain substances like DMT or psilocybin. We know so very little about ourselves, but yet we are still trying to make digital copies of ourselves. So, I mean, this is the current trend line. I'm not saying that this is the future, but if you look at it this way, and there's really nothing else to the human body or the human brain, then that is where it goes. What it then does afterwards is completely up to debate. This is uncharted territory. It's all theory if you want to go the sci-fi route.
Wow. Well, Adrian, I imagine you have to go. We've got a whole other hour coming up with the guest host is coming in, but I would hope that Adrian will be able to join us again here on the show. And Adrian, I appreciate you calling in. We'll be right back. All right, look. I'm completely blown away right now. Got the Tucker Carlson interview. You got David Icahn with us. I love David. You got Elon Musk calling in. That was Elon Musk. But he can have plausible deniability.
All right. Thank you, Alex, for letting me host here. It's always a pleasure. I want to talk about the background, the history, kind of the way that in that interview, Putin went into a big 13-minute history talk. I want to kind of give a meta level, big picture of what the issue is with Russia today, what the issue is with the West's goals and their strategies post-Cold War. I think we're still kind of in a new Cold War setting, you could say. And what's the orthodox ethos that Putin brought up that the West is so concerned with and feels the need to go after? I don't agree, by the way, with everything that Putin said in that interview. I think there were some interesting points that he made. He made a lot of great points. There was a few areas where I disagree, but it's really important to know the history of this. And I want to try to boil it down both from a religious perspective and a geopolitical perspective. So you heard in one of the clips, Alex talking about the mystery religions, and he was playing some older discussions that people have had about the ancient mystery religions. And I want to talk about how that plays into this as well, because secret societies, bloodlines, all of that, believe it or not, does play a role in the reason why Orthodox Christianity is a key enemy of the New World Order, why Russia was targeted, according to Dr. Carol Quigley, 100+ years ago via the Western banking elite, as well as the subversion that's done through various secret societies. In fact, I have with me here Albert Pike's Morals and Dogmas, excuse me. I've read a good bit of this book. It's a gigantic, massive text. I've also got other irrelevant geopolitical texts that I highly recommend everybody should be aware of, like F.A. Mingdal's book, Full Spectrum Dominance. But if we want to talk about the religious side of this, if we go back to the ancient empires, most of the ancient empires, even as we read in the books of Daniel or Ezekiel or Jeremiah, Isaiah, they talk about an attempt to rebuild the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel, of course, was early on in Genesis, this attempt of mankind to construct a single world empire and a single world religion based around some key warrior figure, some key single antichrist deity. The antichrist deity that I'm talking about would be a kind of person or a kind of leader that would stand against the idea of the God in heaven. I don't think that they were building the Tower of Babel because they literally thought they could go into heaven. It was a symbolic defiance of heaven, in my view. So every empire in the world has had this motivation to want to construct this Babel again. Why is that? Why can't world empires just kind of be who they are and do their thing? Well, partly because of human greed and the desire to to rule. To what's the line of Arnold Schwarzenegger? To hear crush your enemies, hear the lamentation of the women. Right, that's the desire of fallen mankind. Yes, but there's also a spirit that impels mankind to engage in these kinds of activities, and I think that's the devil. I think that's a fallen spiritual entity. So the motivation that the devil has is ultimately to gather mankind into a gigantic global antichrist religion and rebellion, a one world religion. The religion that probably would be used would be some kind of blending of all the world religions. We have this idea, for example, even in the ancient empires, that the religion is really a function of the state. As long as you worship the emperor, you can believe or do whatever you want, religiously speaking, just so long as you acknowledge the emperor and his state power or his role as the image of the God figure. That said, most ancient world imperial religions were controlled. They were essentially tools of the state, functions of soft power, or maybe even more than soft power, maybe even the guiding ideology of the empire as a whole. And so they had networks of high priests, networks of secret societies. Plato talks about this, for example, in his book, The Timaeus, where he talks about Socrates going and learning from Solon, who went and learned from the ancient Egyptian priests, all of the Egyptian mysteries. Those mysteries are what's contained in the Timaeus, which is a cosmology, a cosmogony, the origin of the universe, the way the universe is structured, as a kind of outpouring of the divine being itself. And it's described as a snake eating its own tail. That's the Ouroboros that we've all heard of. That comes from Platonism, and ultimately, apparently, if the Timaeus is true, from ancient Egypt. And so the idea of the state then is to utilize these secret societies and networks and co-opted, concealed, occulted knowledge. It just means hidden. It doesn't have to mean something demonic per se, although in many cases it does end up being that. It just means hidden. It just means secret. And so all of the states in these imperial structures had secret religions, which they controlled. Plato describes this in the Republic as the myth of, or excuse me, not the myth of, or the ring of Gyges. The ring is this sort of symbolic thing for inner hidden power. He says that there's a noble lie that the state has to erect by which it rules the population through this noble lie. Because most people can't handle what's actually the case, they need to be given these religious lies to order their lives and to control them. And versions of that same religious deception, manipulation were used throughout, again, Babylon, Persia, the Greeks, and then finally the Romans, as you have this structure listed in the biblical prophets. But we're told, for example, in Daniel 2 and in Daniel 9, and that in the days of this final empire, the Roman Empire, a child would be born, a Messiah would come who would break the reins, would break the control of the previous world religion systems and establish a new kingdom. In Daniel, it even says that the time of the Messiah would bring about a kingdom which would eventually envelop the empire under which he was born. In Christianity, of course, we believe that that's Jesus. We think that's the expansion of the Christian church throughout the first 4 centuries to eventually encompass and supplant the Roman Empire, which then becomes the Roman Byzantine Empire. And so Christianity, from its earliest days, from its New Testament teachings in continuity with the teachings of the Old Testament, the fulfilled prophecies, the hundreds of them, actually, if you go through the whole Old Testament, that find their summation in the person of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. That church that he sets up expands throughout, again, the Roman Empire, eventually encompassing it, fulfilling what we read about in the book of Daniel and other prophecies throughout the book of Isaiah, that the Gentiles, when the Messiah comes, would begin to call upon the God of Israel. That's exactly what we see in the first 1,000, 2,000 years of Christianity, as the Gentile nations converting and coming into this one holy Catholic Apostolic Orthodox Church, in my view. Now, there's schisms and splits in this church later on in history, but the reason this is relevant for what we're talking about today is that there's a dual system, you could say, going on here. There's a system of the secret society philosophies and beliefs, their Hermetic religion, their Gnosticism, their alchemy, all these different sects. You could go back to the Middle Ages with the Bogomils, the Waldensians, the Cathari in France. They had these Gnostic secret teachings in various ways, formations, manifestations, but most of the time it was some kind of dualism, some kind of philosophy of a inner secret Gnostic elite, and everyone else was profane and didn't understand the deep mysteries. For example, if you were a part of the normal public Catholic Church throughout those centuries, the Gnostics, the Cathari, the Bogomils, et cetera, they thought you were basically worthless. You didn't have a higher intellectual, enlightened, a supergnosis or whatever they possessed. Now, most of those groups, historically speaking, have died and gone away, but they did transmit various ideas that continued on, even into Byzantium, which is the Eastern Roman Empire that continued on after Rome in the West fell around 400, 410. So the Eastern Byzantine Empire in Constantinople continued on all the way into the 1400s. And that becomes the longest empire in the history of humanity. It's known as the Christian Byzantine Empire. Wasn't perfect, not saying that it did everything right, but it fell eventually to Islam after it had agreed to a union with the papacy. So once Byzantium became uniate, once they compromised for geopolitical reasons, the certain subversives within the Byzantine Empire opened up the gates to the Muslims, and Byzantium fell. After that point, there was no public, consistent Christian empire left. But what took up the reins of that was the idea of the Third Rome, which was the Russian Empire. And the Russian Empire in its history was full of a lot of squabbles, a lot of controversies, a lot of battles, a lot of difficulty, a lot of rulers that were not ideal either. In fact, under both Catherine and Peter, although there were some positives that Putin mentioned in his interview, both of them actually introduced a lot of revolutionary philosophy from the West. Freemasonic lodges were invited into Russia at that time. And those Freemasonic lodges were actually the breeding grounds in Russia, in this case, by which they could eventually bring about, in part, it's not the only way that happened, but in part, the eventual Russian Revolution, because certain members of the Bolsheviks, many of them were involved in Freemasonic lodges, which was a way for them to network and connect. At the same time as a lot of that was happening in Russia, the British Empire had its global network of Freemasonic lodges that functioned as its intelligence operation. I'm not saying that everybody in the Masonic lodges was a spy. I'm not saying that everybody who was a spy is a Freemason. But throughout the British Empire, this vast network of lodges throughout the world, which is even mentioned in countless movies. Go watch Michael Caine. That's Michael Caine and The Man Who Would Be King, and Sean Connery. Sean Connery plays a reincarnated Alexander the Great, who, with his con man buddy Michael Caine, uses Freemasonic mythology to dupe a very third world tribe, we could say, into believing that he's a messiah. And the whole movie is basically about Freemasonry and religious mythology being a con and a deception. That's just one example that I'm giving, but you can see from the movie that they kind of functioned as, you could say, spies, Freemasonic spies, so to speak. Now, I'm not spending this whole talk on Freemasonry. I just want to give a few examples of how it relates to where we're getting with the confrontation between East and West. And it's not ultimately about Freemasonry. It does play a role, though, in this history. When we come back, we'll get into more of that and explain the Putin-Tucker interview. This is the Alex Jones analysis. We're talking about the big meta-level history breakdown, similar to what Putin did in the interview with Tucker, giving the meta perspective, the big God's eye perspective as best we can. And we're talking about this Hermetic lineage as contrasted to the Christian teaching, the theology of the church as it went through these centuries, and how this is a big part of what's going on in the confrontation between East and West and the Ukraine war. And a lot of people don't know that the Masonic lodges, for example, that first popped up, the Grand Lodge. I mean, there were Masonic lodges prior to the Grand Lodge of England, but the lodges throughout the British Empire, even in mainline history, functioned as Jessica Harlan Jacobs, as a historian. She's not a conspiracy theorist. This is just mainline history. She talks about how these were essentially the intelligence networks of the British Empire. Part and parcel with intelligence networks comes the cultists, the secrets that are trafficked, including religious ideas, religious secrets, gnosis, and so forth. And I mentioned Byzantium in terms of more Cambridge academic scholarship. There's a recent book that came out. It's a very technical, very difficult book called Radical Platonism in Byzantium by Niketas Sinisioglu. The reason this book is relevant is because the whole thesis of the book is that even though the Byzantine Empire had within it the struggle between Neoplatonism and Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, and it tried to suppress the Neoplatonic atheistic Neoplatonism, atheistic Platonism. This lineage, this ideological tradition survived through the character of Platon. Platon was a Byzantine scholar and academic and an atheistic Platonist. His atheistic Platonism, according to Sinisioglu, is what was handed over to the Spinoza circles, and then by extension, eventually, as it found its way into the Jacobin Illuminist circles. So this is yet another historical attestation to the fact that the secret society mysteries, the myths, the symbols, the codes, the hidden keys, and all of this is really just a mechanism by which people are duped and people can be controlled by more cunning people in typically the state, especially throughout this period. And I think that stays the norm all the way up until today. I mean, although today it's more of a corporate state, it's not really, the empire or some king that's controlling us and duping us. It's more so CEOs and Bilderberg and Davos. These are the people who are the new kings of our day. But they're utilizing a lot of these same tricks, tactics, and techniques. And in regard to the mysteries and the secret society techniques that are used, these become ways by which intelligence agents can provocateur. And that's essentially what we see the Masonic lodges in Russia and throughout Europe doing during these revolutionary periods. And we've talked a lot about that famous history text, The Fire in the Minds of Men, which talks about how the lodges took this hermetic ideology and heritage of revolution, of pure flux and chaos, and even atheistic Platonism to its full conclusions by initiating the Bolshevik Revolution. And again, this is not conspiracy theory. This is well documented now in a lot of academic philosophical texts. Hegel and the Hermetic tradition, Hegelianism, which is central to the history of Marxism. You couldn't have Marxism without Hegel, because Marx turns Hegel on his head and uses that dialectical chaos philosophy to produce the synthesis. And that's ultimately the philosophy of the revolutionaries, the Trotskys, the Lenins, these characters, is that constant perpetual chaos is what produces the synthesis where they want to take things. And again, this even comes up in books like Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. There's a whole chapter on what he says true Christianity is. And it's the Prince of Mercy, or the Scottish Trinitarian, where he explains that for the Freemason at that level, God is an eternal world emanator. He's just repeating the Neoplatonic philosophy of Platon and the Hermeticists. And this is exactly, by the way, what the British Empire adopted as its Hermetic philosophy. There's books that have come out recently, scholarly books like Jason Loeb's book, John Dee and the Empire of Angels, Enochian Magic, and the Occult Roots of the Modern World. Now, what does all this have to do with Russia and geopolitics and whatnot? Well, it has to do with the fact that Russia, up into the 20th century, still maintained a degree of the notion of a Christian society, an Orthodox Christian imperium. It had been waning for sure, and there have been a lot of corrupt leaders and a lot of things going on that were bad. People like Peter the Great, I think he was not that great of a leader. I think he was corrupt. But regardless, there is this desire to establish the revolutionary faith throughout the world. And that's why in the Billington book, it's called the revolutionary faith. The revolutionary faith is the same faith that's mentioned by Aldous Huxley in his book, Brave New World. The final revolution is the revolution against man. So anything that stands in the way has to be gotten rid of. Quigley explains this in the first few hundred pages, where he says that the two chief enemies of the Western Anglo-American pragmatic empire, doesn't have anything to do with British people per se. It's not talking about the people. It's talking about the geopolitical structure of the Atlanticist power block. And that's not about Atlantis. Okay, we're not talking about sunken islands. We're talking about this area geopolitically, the West versus the East. And that's why Brzezinski, people like, Kissinger, have talked about how in order to control the world, you control the Eurasian heartland. That's the key to controlling the world. That is the Halford Mackinder thesis, right? The geopolitical pivot of history is controlling the Eurasian heartland. That's the old British imperial structure and model. So what does that mean? That means areas like Ukraine, areas like the borders of Russia are crucial to control for having global hegemony. And the philosophies and the worldviews play a key role in this. It's called Weltanschauungskrieg, worldview warfare. Will we have a worldview based on Western empiricist pragmatic ideas, or what Putin talked about when he was talking to Tucker, eternal ideas? He brought up Dostoevsky. He brought up the idea of eternal truths. In fact, Putin's one of his influences is Ivan Ilyin. He's a Russian thinker and philosopher who's not very well known in the West, but if you read some of his essays that are translated by one of my friends, Mark Hackard, over at Espionage History Archive, or Soul of the East. I don't know if Soul of the East still exists, but Mark has translated a lot of his essays and works. And Ivan Ilyin is a very Dostoevsky-influenced thinker. And he's also written about on how there's a lot of Platonic influences in Dostoevsky, right? And so I know I was critiquing atheistic Platonism earlier. There's different versions of this, so I'm not trying to equate these things. But Putin was definitely expressing the idea that versus the Western idea of everything being in flux, which is essentially the revolutionary philosophy going back to the pre-Socratics, which is restated by people like Lenin and Trotsky. You have the idea that he outlines, which is that there are objective eternal truths. There's natures. People have natures. You can't turn people's natures into some other nature. You can't turn a woman into a man into a woman. There are families, and families are like mini nations, right? And so there's a connection between the family as a people group and the nation as a larger extension of that people group. And that's just the way all human beings have thought for thousands of years. But the revolutionary philosophy at its very core that we're talking about, which was, it's not identical to all of the lodges. I'm not saying everybody is a Freemason, but I'm saying that the philosophy in the revolutionary lodges was used to bring about the revolutions to where we are now. And the last two remaining empires Quigley talks about, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire. He says those two things need to go away for the hope of the Tragedy and Hope to come about. What's the hope of the book Tragedy and Hope? Western democratic capitalism. Now you might think, well, what's wrong with that? That sounds like a good thing. No, it's not what you think. It means technocratic corporate control. When you read Tragedy and Hope, the middle chapter is one of the most important chapters, because it's the chapter where he says that the world I'm talking about will be an AI-run, technocratic, smart city, fake nightmare dystopia. He thinks it's a good thing. This is the Alex Jones Show. Don't go anywhere. I'm your guest host, Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm your guest host, Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. We're breaking down the real spiritual battle that has manifested East and West. That's one of the areas that I disagree with Putin in the discussion that he had with Tucker. But we can actually see this playing out ideologically. And I talked about worldview warfare. Quigley says that the two main enemies to the Atlanticist empire of the West had to be destroyed. That would be the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire. The first two world wars of the last century, Quigley says, had the effect of successfully dissipating and exhausting the Austro-Hungarian Empire and destroying that potential threat out of Europe. Then he says that the next threat would be Russia and the Russian Empire, and the exportation of Bolshevism, communism, Sovietism also, I think, in the long run had the effect of basically wearing down and destroying Russia from within. In the 1990s, you had the Harvard crew, Larry Summers and other people from that university, concocting and figuring out basically how to loot Russia throughout the 1990s. This was the role in part that Yeltsin played as an asset of the CIA to help loot and bring down Russia. Because remember, Brzezinski said that Russia has to be kept down, as well as other countries, to ensure American dominance. That's before, however, they wanted, I think, to shift over into decline, intentional decline. I think the global elite, even in the West, have made the decision that it's time now to bring America down and to make globalist institutions have the power that America has had in terms of its dominance. And so that also occupied a lot of that conversation, was multipolarity and the place of Russia and China in the coming world, and Putin talking about the inability of the fiat money system to actually work, the dollar dying. I think that's what he was referring to. But he also talked about a lot of operations that we over here at InfoWars, myself, many of us have talked about in the last 10, 15 years, talking about how the West, the CIA, these operations they were running, what they were doing in the Maidan coup to spark that off, the false flag events, the Nord Stream pipeline, all of that done basically by the intelligence operations concocted in the West. Whether or not we know exactly which outfit did the operation itself is really not the issue, but because we know who stands to gain, key bono, right? And Putin also brought that up. So basically every one of the pieces of data that came forward in that interview is identical to all of the analysis and the predictions that Alex, myself, and others have given in the last 10 years about East versus West relations. In fact, I did a whole 3-hour lecture on my YouTube channel about 8 months ago, where I said all of this, broke it all down. I talked about all the provocations that the CIA engaged in, State Department, Pussy Riot, splitting the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. All of that was basically brought forward in this amazing interview. And that specific splitting of the church is exactly what I want to highlight now, because this is a key element that a lot of people don't understand in the West. In the West, we don't really have religion as a cohesive idea anymore in terms of an actual expression. There's a loose idea that we're either Protestant or Catholic in the West, but there's no real civic function of the religion. The religion doesn't spill over any longer into the civic sphere because we've bought into the idea of a secular society, and the religion is something that's private and it doesn't really relate to anything else. And that's precisely why we will eventually collapse and die. Now, I think Islam is a terrible religion. I've debated all the top Muslims except for one out there that are known, that are famous, that are public. I go against it all the time, but it has the focus and the impetus to take over in Europe and perhaps even in America in the near future, because human beings cannot subsist and will not last very long in a completely secular atheist society. They will bend to whatever is the dominant masculine force. And Islam, although I think it's a horrible false religion, has that impetus still within it. So it will take over Europe, and that's by design. The Fabian socialists talked about in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s, bringing in Islam first to London and then to the UK and then into Europe, because they thought it could be a force for socialism. They were too full of hubris, I think, to realize that, no, you're not going to control this religion. This religion will take over. You might get a few generations of degenerate children of Muslims, but eventually Islam will take over Europe, and that's by design. And it's not because the global elite are Muslims. They're not Muslims. It's a chess piece, right? It's an ideological chess piece. So chess pieces are not just nation states. It's not just this nation, Ukraine, and let's use them against. It's ideology and religion as well. And that came up in the debate, or excuse me, in the interview with Putin as well, between Tucker and Putin. But I'm saying all this because you understand that from the vantage point of the Western evil geopolitical elite, Russia has to be destroyed and taken down, because even though that was a big part of the Cold War, containing it, bringing it down, looting it, the Russian people and the Russian soul that Putin talked about are very tough. They're very resilient, and they're very hard to bring down. That's why so many of these Western neoliberal toxic culture operations have to be exported, as well as potentially all of the bioweapons labs. And by the way, that was actually reported on years ago. Dilyana Galatseva, I think is her name. I was at a lecture event with her. She gave a presentation in 2017 or so on the Pentagon biolabs all over Ukraine and Eastern Europe and other places. So this has been known for a long time, and the provocations then were intentional. Putting the biowebs there, the 7 years of warfare via NATO against Russia that has sparked this conflict, the 2014 coup operation, again, done by the West, all the color revolutions that were funded by Soros entities, CIA stuff, that was all in the interview. They didn't mention everybody by name like Soros, but when he's talking about the CIA operations to do these things in Ukraine, the Orange Revolution, that was all Soros and CIA back in the 90s. Victoria Nuland putting all this money there, that's Soros and CIA. That's all the same crew. Okay. All of what the CIA did in the Cold War is now done by the National Endowment for Democracy, Soros, and founded. All those things are the new ways that the CIA does these things. They don't just do it the way that they used to do it in the Cold War. Those are the new cutouts and fronts that are used. And it has nothing to do with democracy or human rights. Those are weapons of culture war, soft power, you see, and even cutouts for black ops at times. Same operations in Syria back in 2012, 13, 14 against Assad. Same operations and strategy against Putin. Same operations of sniper attacks to try to set off crowd riots, to try to have a coup, and all of that was mentioned. Now, not Assad, but coups against Russia, coups against Putin. That was all brought up in the interview. So again, everything that we've talked about was brought up. And again, this key spiritual component is there to split the church in the Ukraine by creating a fake CIA State Department church run by people who aren't even real clerics, people that were defrocked from other churches. That's the actual history of what's going on in the Ukraine, and it's fostered and funded by Western NGOs, Western universities, Jesuit universities. They all play a key role in that because the Jesuits, the CIA, they basically joined at the hip at the time of Vatican II. There's a gigantic 800-page book, Time Life Magazine, Henry Luce, and the American Proposition, where the CIA created the doctrinal warfare program, C.D. Jackson. That's to utilize these churches during the Cold War for the purpose of pushing Americanism and American soft power. But what that does is now places you under a new master. And that's why Francis and all these churches, the Pope Francis, Catholic Church, that's why they walk in lockstep now with Davos, Klaus, and the World Economic Forum, because they're all part of the same powers. That's the Atlantis' power structure. It's all these entities. And they're concerned with Russia as a potential rising threat, as well as perhaps China as well. And that doesn't make those people angels and good guys. It just is the reality of geopolitics. But there is this spiritual component there, which is the battle of evil versus good. So although people in the state, people who are leaders, presidents, kings, whatever, they may view all of this as pure pragmatic politics. Like if you read the book Dune, right? A lot of the people in Dune, they view it as just pragmatic politics, but there's actual prophecies, right, about the true leader and the savior and all that, the Messiah. And likewise, in terms of Christianity, we have a Messiah and we have a providential spiritual meaning of history. And that providential spiritual meaning of history involves the church as a key player. And of course, we know that Satan has the desire to destroy the church. That's a key element I want to highlight. So if you're watching this, remember, head over to my X, and you'll see at the top there, I'm doing a new live event with our good buddy, comedian Jamie Kennedy from the movie Scream. We'll be live March 15th in Los Angeles to do another event, 5 hours of lectures and comedy, impressions, stand-up, information. It's all there. Get your tickets on my X, pinned at the top of my profile.